There are ancient discoveries that do not look ancient. They look like mistakes in the timeline. In Turkey, there is a sanctuary built thousands of years before the pyramids, at a time when humanity, according to the official version, was barely learning how to survive. In Lebanon, there are stone blocks so enormous that even today, with cranes, software, steel, and millions of dollars, moving them would be an engineering nightmare. In Bolivia, there are stones cut with a precision that looks like the work of a modern factory. In China, there are underground caverns so vast they must have required an industrial-scale operation. Yet there are no records, no plans, and not a single clear explanation of why anyone made them. And that is only the beginning. Today, we are going to explore 7 ancient discoveries that defy all easy explanation. These are not legends. They are not internet myths. They are real places, real objects, and real structures, excavated, measured, analyzed, and debated by archaeologists, engineers, and historians. And the more closely you study them, the more uncomfortable one idea becomes. Maybe our ancestors were not less capable than us. Maybe they simply knew different things, and some of those things were lost. Let us begin with a site that does not just challenge history. E3 writes Italiano. This is not just a video. It's a doorway to secrets that were once sealed shut. If you truly want to know the truth, then subscribe. And remember, every like keeps another truth alive. Turkey, Göbekli Tepe. For thousands of years, it was just another hill beneath the Anatolian sun. Nothing suggested that beneath the soil rested one of the most astonishing ritual complexes ever discovered. In 1994, the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt arrived at the site and almost immediately understood that this was not a natural mound. Beneath the earth were monumental circles of stone, T-shaped pillars, some over 16 feet tall and weighing between 10 and 20 tons, carved with foxes, snakes, boars, vultures, and symbols that no one has fully decoded. What stunned the world was not just the size, it was the date. Göbekli Tepe is around 11,600 years old. That places it thousands of years before Stonehenge, thousands of years before the great cities of Mesopotamia, and far earlier than the time when, according to the traditional narrative, human societies were supposed to be capable of organizing projects of this complexity. This is where the story becomes deeply uncomfortable for the textbooks, because when Göbekli Tepe was built, agriculture was only beginning to emerge. There was no advanced pottery, no metal, no wheel, no organized states like the ones we usually associate with monumental architecture. And yet someone coordinated labor, quarried stone, designed enclosures, raised colossal pillars, and decorated them with a coherent symbolic system. In other words, the sanctuary came first, and civilization may have come after. Some researchers dare to suggest something radical, that agriculture did not create the temple, that the temple, or their need to gather around shared beliefs, may have pushed human groups to farm, settle, and organize themselves. If that is true, then one of the most repeated ideas about our origins is backwards. And there is one more detail that makes the mystery even stranger. Centuries after it was used, Göbekli Tepe was not destroyed by enemies, nor collapsed in an earthquake. It was deliberately buried. Tons of soil, rocks, and debris were carefully placed to cover it, as if its own builders wanted to hide it from the world. Why would anyone build a place like this, only to bury it themselves? Hold on to that question, because what comes next is even more overwhelming. An ancient platform carrying stones so massive that simply imagining them being moved already sounds impossible. China. The Longyu Caves. In 1992, in China's Zhejiang province, a local woman named Wu Enai became convinced that one of the village ponds was not natural. Everyone else thought it was just another local story. Still, she decided to pump the water out, and she kept pumping. Day after day, what appeared underneath was not mud, not irregular rock, and not a simple cavity. It was a gigantic man-made cavern. Then more were found, and more, until at least 24 enormous underground chambers had been revealed. Some measure over 1,000 square meters. Their ceilings rise dramatically overhead, Their walls are covered in uniform parallel marks, as if the entire interior had been carved at the same angle, with the same rhythm, under the same discipline. This is where the vertigo begins. To create these caves, an enormous volume of rock had to be removed, possibly close to 1 million cubic meters in total, according to some estimates. That implies mass labor, planning, ventilation, lighting, drainage, and logistics. And yet there is no clear historical record describing an operation of this scale. No one knows with certainty who excavated them. No one knows why. No one knows where all the removed stone went. And no one fully understands why the design maintains such obsessive consistency. They do not look like ordinary mines. They do not look like typical tombs. They do not look like makeshift shelters. They look like a colossal operation carried out with purpose and then erased from memory. If a modern civilization built something like this, it would leave blueprints, contracts, spoil heaps, tools, salaries, maps, administrative orders, and mountains of indirect evidence. Lungu behaves as if it wanted to exist without leaving a trace. And still, this is not the most elegant mystery on the list, because there is an object found in Europe that compresses astronomy, power, and symbolic knowledge into a single piece of metal. Germany. The Nebra sky disk. At the end of the 20th century, looters found an object on a German hilltop that seemed almost dreamlike. A greenish bronze disc about a foot across, inlaid with gold. On its surface are a circular form that may represent the sun or full moon, a crescent moon, and a cluster of stars, often identified as the Pleiades. For a time, the object was surrounded by doubt, forgery concerns, black market dealings, and controversy. But analysis eventually placed it around 1600 BC, and that turned it into a historical bombshell. Why? Because this is not just decoration. The golden arcs added at the sides match the angle between sunrise and sunset at the solstices for that latitude. In other words, the disc appears to encode precise astronomical observation. This is not merely wonder at the sky. This is the understanding of patterns fixed into metal and transformed into an object loaded with ritual or political meaning. That changes the conversation about Bronze Age Europe. Too often, it is imagined as a patchwork of scattered communities cut off from sophisticated celestial knowledge. Nibra answers, with a piece that seems to say, "We watch the sky more carefully than you think." Think about what it represents. Someone had to observe for years, to connect cycles, to abstract information, to decide which symbols mattered, and to create an object that functioned not only as an emblem, but as a conceptual map of the cosmos. In other words, they did not just inherit the sky. They measured it. And Aventon, the final discovery in this journey, goes beyond that, because it is not a tool, not a cave, and not an impossible stone. It is the trace of an entire civilization that appeared with an art style so strange, so refined, and so different that for decades archaeologists struggled to place it inside the story of history itself. Lebanon Baalbek. If Göbekli Tepe destroys the timeline, Baalbek crushes physical logic. In modern Lebanon stand the remains of the Roman complex of Heliopolis, a place grand even by the standards of the empire. Immense columns, cyclopean foundations, monumental terraces. But the real mystery is not what every tourist photographs. It is what almost no one fully processes at first glance. The gigantic stone blocks built into the base of the site. Tray of team, known as the Trilathan, weigh around 800 tons each, not 80. 800, and they are not lying abandoned in a quarry without purpose. They are set several meters above the ground, perfectly integrated into the structure, as if moving such weight were a routine job. Now, here, these. In the nearby quarry, archaeologists found another even more monstrous block, the so-called Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighing over 1,000 tons. And more recent excavations revealed stones even larger, some estimated at more than 1,500 tons. That is the kind of number that makes even modern engineers uneasy. The standard explanation says that the Romans, extraordinary masters of construction, built the complex using rollers, sledges, ramps, pulleys, massive labor, and flawless organization. And yes, Rome achieved astonishing feats, but Baalbek pushes that explanation to its breaking point, because moving big stones is one thing. Extracting them, transporting them, Aligning team and lifting them with precision is something else entirely, especially when every mistake means total disaster. We are not talking about a statue. We are talking about masses of stone so extreme that a single error could end the entire attempt. Some experts believe the lower platform might even predate the Roman phase visible today. Not everyone accepts that theory, but the possibility makes the site even more unsettling, because then we may be looking at a construction technology inherited, reused, or expanded by later cultures, as if someone arrived after the fact and built on top of work that already seemed impossible. What makes Baalbek so fascinating is this. You do not need wild theories to feel dizzy. You only need the numbers. You only need to imagine one of those stones slipping out of control. You only need to ask how many failed attempts would have been enough for a civilization to give up on such madness. And yet, there they are. In some parts of the ancient world, power was displayed with gold. In others, with armies. At Baalbek, power seems to have been displayed by forcing the mountain itself to obey. And if you think the mystery ends when we leave the megaliths behind, wait, because now we are going more than 12,000 feet above sea level, to a place where stone does not only weigh too much, it also looks as though it was cut with tools that should not exist in that context. Bolivia, Pumapunku, scattered ruins, broken blocks, freezing wind, and pieces of andesite, and red sandstone so strange that, seen up close, they look like industrial components taken apart. Straight channels, sharp angles, clean perforations, H-shaped blocks that fit together as if they belonged to a modular system. Pumapunku is part of the Tiwanaku complex, near Lake Titicaca. The culture that built it remains remarkable, even without exaggeration. But here comes the problem that has fueled debate for decades. Many of the stones show finishes that seem to exact for the technology we usually assign to that region and time. Some cuts are so straight and uniform that in photographs they look machine-made. The grooves repeat patterns. The surfaces suggest planning. And several stones had to be moved from considerable distances across a harsh, high-altitude landscape. The uncomfortable part is not that there are no explanations. There are stone hammers, abrasives, cords, patient labor, templates, and extraordinary craftsmanship. The problem is that when you combine altitude, weight, precision, and scale, the explanation stops feeling simple. And you still have not seen the most frustrating mystery yet. Objects from the Roman world found across Europe, and no one knows what they were for. The Roman dodecahedrons. Sometimes the mystery does not weigh hundreds of tons. Sometimes it fits in your hands and still confuses generations of experts. More than 100 of them have been found across Europe, France, Germany, Britain, Belgium, Switzerland, Italy, Austria. They all share a shape that is impossible to ignore. They are hollow bronze objects with 12 pentagonal faces, holes of different sizes on each face, and small knobs on every corner. These are not random curiosities. They were carefully cast. Their proportions are consistent, and most belong to a period between the 2nd and 4th centuries AD. Now comes the absurd part. The Roman Empire left behind military texts, legal codes, poetry, satire, architecture, recipes, contracts, private letters, graffiti, and manuals of every kind. And yet there is no clear surviving text explaining what these objects were actually used for. No definitive description, no unmistakable illustration, not a single line that closes the case. The theories are endless. Measuring tools, ritual objects, candlestick holders. Textile devices symbolic. These are astronomical instruments, military rangefinders used to estimate distance. Some have even suggested they were used for knitting gloves, and that is exactly what makes the Roman dodecahedron so mesmerizing. No explanation convinces everyone. We're not dealing with a one-of-a-kind artifact found in suspicious circumstances. We are dealing with objects spread across a huge imperial geography, made according to a shared logic, yet completely silent, as if they belong to a kind of knowledge so obvious in their own time that no one felt the need to explain it. And then that knowledge vanished entirely. That silence is unsettling, because it reminds us of something we prefer to forget. The loss of knowledge does not always take thousands of years. Sometimes one generation is enough. Sometimes all it takes is a war, a language shift, a collapse of institutions, the disappearance of a trade. What is ordinary to one civilization can become an unsolvable mystery to the next. And speaking of everyday things that now seem impossible to reproduce, let us return to stone. At Pumapungko, some blocks appear designed with an almost mathematical obsession, not because they are laboratory perfect, but because they show geometric intention, repetition, modules, system. Several pieces have internal cuts, recesses, channels, and angles that suggest assembly, as if they formed part of an architecture designed to fit together in a very specific way. Serious researchers do not claim impossible machines were involved, but they do acknowledge that the skill required to create certain forms was extraordinary. And then there is the material itself. Andesite is not a forgiving stone. Working it with precision demands time, technique, and control that become even more impressive when repeated at scale. And all of this happened on a high plateau where even breathing is work. Pumapungko is unsettling because it does not fit the cartoon version of a primitive past. It does not look improvised. It looks like the broken remains of a sophisticated system we still cannot fully reconstruct. But the most disturbing mystery on this list is not even under open sky. It is hidden beneath water. Or more accurately, beneath what people thought for centuries was only water. Because in China, 4 generations, villagers used certain ponds for fishing and irrigation, until one day, someone decided to drain them. And what they discovered was that they were not ponds at all. They were ceilings. Chinan Sangsingdui. If the other discoveries make you question what you know about the past, Sangsingdui forces you to admit that entire chapters are still missing. In 1929, a farmer in Sichuan found jade objects while working the land. Decades later, systematic excavations revealed something extraordinary. The remains of a Bronze Age culture that looked unlike anything previously known in China at the time. Huge bronze masks with bulging eyes and exaggerated ears. Human heads with impossible proportions. Ritual figures. A golden scepter and a towering bronze tree several meters tall. So complex that it feels less like an artifact and more like a myth made solid. Dating place Sangsingdui, roughly between the 12th and 11th centuries BC. In other words, it was contemporary with other great ancient cultures around the world, but its style did not fit comfortably into the dominant Shang-centered narrative. It was like discovering a powerful voice where the history books had only left a whisper. The most unsettling part is not just the aesthetic. It is the technical level. Large-scale bronze casting was already difficult. Creating pieces this monumental, detailed, and symbolically intense requires an established craft tradition, access to resources, organized elites, and a complex worldview. No one improvises Sangsingdui, and then there is the mystery of its destruction or abandonment. Many of the objects were found broken, burned, or buried in pits, as if they had been deposited during an extreme ritual or a crisis that permanently changed the life of the site. War, flooding, a river changing course, a religious transformation. The theories exist, but none of them erase the feeling that we are looking at the remains of a world that almost vanished completely. That, in the end, is what connects all 7 discoveries we explored today. Kogekli Tepe suggests that spiritual purpose may have organized human societies before full agricultural civilization. Baalbek confronts us with masses of stone that humiliate our mechanical intuition. Pumapungko preserves a stone geometry that feels too modern for the stereotype of the ancient past. The Roman dodecahedrons remind us that even an empire that wrote so much can still leave behind mysteries without a manual. Longyu proves that a colossal engineering project can disappear from historical memory. Nibra reveals that precise skywatching was not the monopoly of the civilizations we place at the center of history. And Sangsingdui shouts that entire cultures are still waiting to be understood. The uncomfortable lesson is this: human history does not always move in a straight line. Sometimes it rises, sometimes it falls, sometimes it forgets, sometimes it buries its best ideas, and sometimes it leaves behind objects, temples, stones, and symbols that outlive even their names. Maybe the real mystery is not how they lifted each block, carved each figure, or mapped each star. Maybe the real mystery is how much knowledge was lost between one civilization and the next, How many techniques died with their masters? How many secrets remained buried under sand, mud, water, or fire? How many times humanity may already have gone farther than we imagine, and then had to begin again? And now, tell me something. Out of these 7 discoveries, which one disturbed you the most? Which one made you feel that the ancient world was far more advanced, stranger, or more dangerous than we were taught? Because if this is what has already come to light, imagine what is still buried somewhere beneath the earth. There are still answers waiting, and maybe some of them were never meant to be found. If you felt even a moment of doubt, curiosity, or unease while watching this, then you're already part of this journey. Subscribe to our explorers, because here, we don't just explore history, we uncover what it tried to hide. And now, tell me, which discovery stayed with you the most? Write it in the comments, because sometimes the questions we ask are more dangerous than the answers we find.